Is America under Donald Trump now on an irreversible path to supporting Russia over Ukraine in the Russo-Ukrainian war? Привет, my name is Connor Klein and welcome to another video on my channel here, Geopolitics with Connor Klein, focusing on the Russo-Ukrainian war. So I'm going to assume you've seen the debacle that took place in the Oval Office on Friday. It was unprecedented and scandalous, complete breach of diplomatic decorum. Arguments like that shouldn't be taking place in front of the cameras. This is not a reality TV show. This is real, serious diplomatic work, and what happened was definitely unacceptable, and it exposed Donald Trump and his Vice President J.D. Vance's distaste and disdain for Ukraine and Vladimir Zelensky. No one could imagine them behaving like that with Vladimir Putin. Let's be frank about it. They would not have been also questioning his dress sense as was done at that particular press spray. But this direction and turn started to become apparent, I'd say around when J.D. Vance gave his speech at the Munich Security Conference a couple of weeks ago now. And basically in that speech he stated that in his point of view, from his point of view, that the main challenge to Europe is not, or threat to Europe is not China and Russia, it's actually European democracies and how they treat parties and particular causes that in general seem to be particularly pro-Kremlin. He then went and met with the leader of the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, whose party is particularly pro-Kremlin in its point of view. Now this then escalated, obviously, with the diplomatic spat that went on once Volodymyr Zelensky wouldn't sign a neo-colonial diktat for a minerals deal. It wasn't really a deal, it was basically sign over your minerals going forward from Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary in Kyiv. Trump then retaliated quite petulantly by calling Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator, saying it only 4% approval rating and that it was Ukraine started the war. Absolutely outrageous and ridiculous. Why doesn't he call Vladimir Putin a dictator? Because he is for Vladimir Putin. Let's be very frank about it at this point. Things seem to have subsided a little bit, and then we had that outrageous debacle on Friday. Now the US has paused military aid to Ukraine. USAID has already been disbanded. That was dispersing the humanitarian and financial aid to a certain extent from the US to Ukraine. So basically cut off all support. And maybe they're going to try and renegotiate this minerals deal. Basically, what was on the table on Friday was more of a reconstruction agreement for Ukraine in the future, and basically agreement to agree an agreement sometimes. So it was pretty innocuous, but maybe Donald Trump is trying to negotiate something that basically takes resources from Ukraine, basically because Ukraine is in a weaker position, because they would like the US aid in order to be able to fight off Russian aggression. However, that has been seen for the last 80 years as being in Washington's interests. So it doesn't really make sense to try and basically screw over a loyal ally in order who's actually fighting on behalf of your interests when you just get some resources that wouldn't be able to compensate probably for what would be the diplomatic fallout of such a move. And Donald Trump doesn't criticize Russia. US unprecedentedly voted with Russia and North Korea against a UN resolution by Ukraine condemning the invasion of 2022 on its 3rd anniversary and referring to Russian aggression, calling for Russia to leave. US did not vote in favor of that. They actually voted against. Pretty incredible. They've actually taken down the Ukrainian flags that were up in front of their diplomatic buildings, at least here in the Baltics. I have noticed that. And many of the administration officials are refusing to call the invasion an invasion. It's a bit like in Russia, let's be frank about it, with the special military operation. You're not allowed to call it a war. America is adopting the same kind of style. So also they were having discussions in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia that they want to sign business deals with Russia. Trump has said that with his new kind of golden visa, 5 million investment, or it's not even investments, can be bought also by Russian oligarchs. So it seems that the trajectory is very clear that Donald Trump has decided that he is going to favor Russia, not just over Ukraine and the Russo-Ukrainian war, but over all of America's traditional allies. And he is, it seems like, viewing America's allies as kind of adversaries, and America's adversaries, at least in the form of Russia, as an ally, which makes no sense at all strategically, because Russia is not that important. Let's be frank about it. Its economy is not that big. It does have nuclear weapons, and it is fighting a war, a period war of aggression in Ukraine, so it's a problem. But Russia and Vladimir Putin have stated for most of the last 3 years that they claim they're not even fighting Ukraine in Ukraine. They're fighting America, in effect, and the Anglo-Saxons. So it is pretty incredible to see Donald Trump take this position. Also, we've got the trade war, the tariff war with Mexico and Canada, where basically he's scuppering the US's well-earned good reputation with its allies in the region and those beneficial trade arrangements, including the trade agreement that Donald Trump signed with Mexico and Canada in his first term. So is this irreversible? At this point, definitely the damage coming out of it, that there is damage, is irreversible. Allies are not going to trust the United States going forward. Not going to really want to buy weapons from the US either, or be that close to them, because it can now be used to extort from you. And that is obviously extremely troubling for the US's interests. But more importantly, the longer this goes on, then doing an about-face and suddenly supporting Ukraine in the war, suddenly coming back to its allies, becomes less and less likely. It seems very clear to me that Donald Trump has taken this position. He may play with allies in terms of pretending he's going to come back to their side, but at this point, I think we have to accept that for the next little bit under 4 years, the US is no longer an ally of not just Ukraine, but of Europe. I'm leaving out, obviously, Russia. Geographically, of course, Russia also is part of Europe in part, but its allies in Europe, traditional allies, and it's even allies closer to home like Mexico and Canada. It's constant language from Donald Trump about Canada being the 51st state. He even said last night after imposing these tariffs. It stopped being a little bit humorous. It's the same language as Vladimir Putin. Annexing Greenland, same language as Vladimir Putin. It's imperial expansionism, it's spheres of influence, and it makes, again, no strategic sense, even if you look like that, to be supporting Russia, because the natural big power in Europe would be the European Union because of its economic weight and potentially its military and its cultural weight as well. However, Donald Trump is favoring the smaller party on the continent of Europe, the aggressive party, the party that doesn't like the United States, that has been its adversary since the end of World War II, over its loyal allies over the last 80 years. And that, at this point, in terms of damage, is definitely irreversible. We've also seen, just as a closing comment, J.D. Vance insult British and French troops, referring to it as some random country, when you have to think back to 9/11, when the United States invoked Article 5 and US troops needed the support, or got the support, of British forces in particular, amongst many other allies that went and helped them in Afghanistan and Iraq. Even though I personally opposed those endeavors at the time, it was something that those allies did. And one of the main arguments, when I think back to those days, was that, well, US has got our back, so in this hour of need, we should go and support them. I wonder if the US is now attacked, having changed this course in its political trajectory and its diplomatic stance, whether those European allies will be so forthcoming with aid and support to defend the United States. So that's the end of this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and Slava Ukraini! Do peremоги!